Hello, ISPRS. My name is Paul Arthur Berkman, Professor of Science Diplomacy at the Tufts University Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Also the Director of the Arctic Futures Initiative at the International Institute of Applied Systems Analysis in Vienna. Presentation today, which I was very honored to be able to share, related to science in a global context in terms of sharing information in ways that are helpful to the world we live in now and generations into the future. I work in an area called science diplomacy, where science is not just a matter of thinking in terms of science into policy or science policy interactions, but science diplomacy is actually an activity, an ongoing initiative process that involves the entire world and in all of the information that we produce as a society, as a civilization. In a sense, there are a number of lessons that we can see in terms of how the scientific community has contributed to the world. Insights about change, change over time, change over space. These changes are fundamental to any type of decision making. If we're to respond to impacts or resources or issues, understanding the consequences, the propagation of change is essential. Science is also an early warning system, provides us with guidance and insight about where emergencies will exist and how to allocate resources to respond to those emergencies. Science is a source of invention and commercial enterprise. The insights that we have, for example, about drilling in the world's oceans, about where there are resources of minerals and gas that fuel our world, come from science. The technology to go out and explore, seismic profiles and so on, come from science. And so science is at the center of commercial enterprise. But probably most importantly, science is a tool of diplomacy and well illustrated in terms of the space race emerging after World War II, when it was recognized that the combination of nuclear weapons and missiles, rockets, would be combined to produce ballistic missiles. And at that time, during the International Geophysical Year, it brought together the United States and the Soviet Union, both who were the first nuclear powers, to be able to think in terms of cooperation. And science provided a vehicle for the United States and Soviet Union to develop something as significant as the Antarctic Treaty, which effectively designated nearly 10% of the Earth to be used for peaceful purposes only. And the basis for that treaty was scientific cooperation as illustrated during the International Geophysical Year. And it was the Antarctic Treaty itself that became the first nuclear arms agreement in the world. And so if we look back at that moment in time and we think about the lessons of building common interests among nations, and we think on a planetary scale, where we look at 30% of the Earth that's covered within the boundaries of nations, and recognize that 70% of the Earth explicitly falls beyond the boundaries of nations in areas that we've collectively designated as international spaces, the high seas, Antarctica, and the deep sea, as well as outer space, all fall beyond sovereign jurisdictions. And so in a sense, the designation of international spaces identifies the challenge that we collectively face as a civilization forever after, which is one of balancing national interests and common interests, recognizing that nations will always first and foremost consider their national interests. But we live in a world where there are interdisciplinary requirements, where individuals are increasingly crossing the boundaries of nations, where the challenges can no longer be solved within the boundaries of individual nations or by individual nations. And along those lines, science provides a tool of diplomacy. It's independent, in effect, of political, economic, or cultural ideology. It's a framework where individuals are taught to think in terms of questions. From a very early age, when we have our children, for example, the children drop things and they break things and they drown things and they burn things, and it's not because they're malicious. It's because they're asking, what happens if I do this? They're curious. They're asking questions. And somehow that innate curiosity about the world we live in is important to foster, to vitalize a world where we're curious, inquisitive, and we're given the skills and the tools to answer those questions. And that, in effect, is what science offers to the world. It offers a bridge between the known and the unknown. And in effect, we're walking into the future collectively on a planetary scale. And the responsibilities are no longer with individual sources, individual people, institutions, industries. We have collective responsibilities. And in this context, it's a matter of building common interests. So I was very pleased and honored to be able to share insights at this international meeting. The Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing has a very basic responsibility in terms of synoptic thinking on a planetary scale, to be able to offer data that's collected without boundaries, data that is useful on a planetary scale, data that can be measured over time in terms of thinking about concepts of change. And together, these are the types of insights that are necessary to create a future, a world that will be helpful and happy and prosperous and safe for our children. I think that the problems, it's the question about why interdisciplinary. And today, one of the words that is used to an increasing extent is the word holistic. And it often is used without definition. So for the purposes of defining holistic, I would define it as international, interdisciplinary, and inclusive. And it's a matter of thinking in a practical way. The problems that we face as a civilization, whether they're local problems in a city or global problems on a planetary scale, are no longer the domain, were probably never the domain of individual disciplines or individual areas of expertise. To solve these problems requires concerted efforts across disciplines. And in this sense, it's a matter of thinking not just in terms of natural sciences, in terms of investigation of physical or chemical or biological properties. It's also a matter of thinking in terms of society, the economic, the socio-economic features of the world we live in, the residents in areas. And these types of solutions require thinking across boundaries. And for the young people that are beginning their careers, you're often told that interdisciplinary is a jack of all trades, a master of none, and are discouraged from thinking in terms of an interdisciplinary context. I would counter that with saying that every collaboration, whatever it is, requires that each individual in that collaboration brings strength to the table in one way or another. So it is required to have a skill, an insight, an expertise. However, interdisciplinary is far more complicated because not only do you have to bring your skill to the table, but you have to be in a position to understand those of other experts who speak different languages, in a sense, who have different jargons and different emphasis, and to be able to bridge those different disciplinaries to come up with shared solutions, solutions that are helpful to the world we live in. And I think this is probably the most important gift in terms of education of young people, is to follow your intuition, to not be discouraged by those that say you can't do something, or to be concerned about the lack of funding or other issues. Follow your intuition and your heart and produce things that will be helpful to the world. And at the end of your life, when you look back and you think about what you've accomplished, you in some way will have made a contribution.